August 6, 1984, Huntington Pizza, Jones Street. Newark, New Jersey. There were only 3 diners in the store. A fat, bald black man was eating steak, and the other 2 were sitting at the door, flipping through the newspapers in their hands. The back door of the kitchen was opened from the outside, and a tall, high-nosed, deep-eyed, white, handsome man rushed into the kitchen and hugged the boss and chef in a stunned look. "Sean, what are you doing?" Fat boss asked with a frown. After breaking free, the man called Sean shouted excitedly, "I have good news to tell you. I'm here to resign from you." "Damn it, you're crazy. Say it again." The fat boss's face instantly turned sour. "I'm fucking quitting. Ha ha ha. I just received the call. My dead father, who I've never met, died. And I inherited a large inheritance." Sean's face flushed with excitement, and he waved his fist heavily. At this time, there was a sharp brake sound, and a silver-white Buick stopped at the door of the pizza shop. The car door opened, and 2 bald twin brothers wearing silver-gray suits and neatly trimmed beards got out of the car on the left and right. "Boss, it's the Salamanca family." The 2 people sitting at the door put down the newspaper and looked out. The black fat man seemed to have heard nothing, still lowering his head and eating steak with relish, with a momentum of not being in a state of panic even if the mountain collapsed in front of him without any nonsense. The bald man in the silver-gray suit lifted his collar and pulled out 2 submachine guns from his arms. Da 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 da. The sound of a raging metal storm. The 2 bodyguards were shot into sieves before they could react. The black fat man, who had just looked calm and had the demeanor of a general, turned around and was about to run. As soon as he stood up, he was hit by a bullet and fell to the ground after firing a round of bullets. The bald man threw the submachine gun back into the car, pulled out the pistol from his waist again, and frantically pulled the trigger at the still squirming black fat man until the sound of an empty gun was heard. The 2 glanced at each other expressionlessly and threw the pistols into the car again. "Get off the car, kill people, get on the car and leave." It took 30 seconds before and after, leaving only the pizza shop that was ravaged by the metal storm like a wasteland and 5 bodies lying in a pool of blood. Sean lay on the ground, his eyes wide open, his 5 fingers tightly digging the ground, his face full of fear, despair, and unwillingness. "I haven't inherited a large inheritance yet, and I don't have time to enjoy life in the deadly pizza shop." Sean's body suddenly twitched, and the bones and flesh at the back of his head began to slowly squirm. A metal bullet that had been shot in for most of the time was slowly squeezed out, and fell to the ground with a ding sound, breaking the dead silence at the scene. "Ah!" With a painful groan, Wang Zhen sat up from the ground, holding the back of his head. Who said that being shot through the brain would be painless? He exhaled lightly, raised his hand from the back of his head to his eyes, and blood dripped from his palm onto his body. He glanced at the messy store and grabbed the bullet beside him with his bloody palm. "I was shot in the head again." Right, the blood on his hand proved that all this was true, although he was not a good person. But waves of dizziness came. His head hurt badly, and there was a double image in front of his eyes. His brain seemed to be thrown into a wall-breaking machine. His thoughts were in a mess, and Wang Zhen covered his head and screamed again. His brain was like a messed-up tofu brain, and he couldn't think normally at all. He only had one thought: the murder scene. The police would be here soon, and he had to leave here immediately. His head hurt a lot. His thoughts were confused, and he only vaguely remembered that there was a back door here. After stumbling a few steps, he gradually walked steadily. The moment he pushed open the back door, he recalled the words he heard before he died: "Salamanca's house. No matter who you are, I will remember you." Wang Zhen clasped his palms together and held the bullet tightly. He walked to the back street, raised his hand to block the dazzling light, and walked in one direction with a dizzy head. He instinctively remembered that his residence was here. Sean walked on the street covered with blood and got home in a daze. It took him a long time to open the door. The moment the door closed, Wang Zhen lost his strength and fell to the ground, losing consciousness. The noisy sound of police cars sounded, and the pizza shop was quickly surrounded by the police. The police raised their guns. Their faces were tense, and their steps were brisk. The gangsters had already run away, and they were just pretending. "Well, it seems that the gangsters have already run away." Putting the pistol back and scanning the scene, a young man looked at the mess and said in surprise, "Is this a fucking war? How many shots were fired?" "There's another person." Another older policeman stood where Sean was lying just now and said, "Old Mike, are you sure? Look here." The white man called Mike walked to the back door, pointed to the blood on the door handle and said, "Someone opened the door and walked out from here." "Okay, well, go ask the nearby shops and residents." Then he turned and walked out. 2 hours later. Here, Mike Herman's hot looked up at the house number and confirmed it again. Bang. Bang bang. Richie Roberts knocked on the door hard. "Is anyone there?" Bang, bang, bang. Sean, I know you are at home. Open the door. We are the police. Please cooperate with the investigation of a homicide case. If you don't open the door, I will break in. In the room, Sean's eyelids moved and slowly opened. His eyes were out of focus, and he was obviously not fully awake yet. Bang, bang! Richie Roberts stepped back a few steps and suddenly rushed forward and hit the door hard after a few hits. The door that could not bear the weight was smashed open with a bang. Mike rushed in with a pistol in hand and saw Sean, who was covered in blood, slowly getting up from the ground. Don't move, police! Turning over and sitting on the ground, Sean looked up at the black muzzle of the gun pointing at his head, and then looked at the police badges on the two people, and said calmly, I can see it. So what are the two police officers doing in breaking into my house? First, he got the information from the neighbors of the pizza shop, then found the address, and went to the door. It took almost 2 hours, and now Sean is much better. Old Mike and the other man looked at each other, obviously surprised that Sean was so calm. 2 hours ago. Jones Street, Huntington Pizza. Do I need to remind you again? Well, although I can tell you directly that I was in the kitchen when the attack happened, I didn't know who opened fire. I was a victim. Not a criminal, but... Sean shrugged and got up from the ground, looked down at his bloody clothes and palms, and then raised his head and said, Wait for me. I'm going to take a shower. It's really uncomfortable. Also help me call an ambulance. Or send me to the hospital first. Sean pointed to the back of his head and said, There is a big cut here. Although the blood has coagulated, the wound still needs to be cleaned and sutured. Are you teaching me how to do things? Rich Roberts pointed the gun at Sean and moved. You fucking figure out your identity. You are a criminal suspect and I am the police. It's not your turn to give me orders. Don't move. I advise you not to move. Rich Roberts, whose authority was challenged, said with a cold face, You fled from the crime scene. Before there is evidence to prove that you are not a criminal, you'd better be honest. Sean frowned, looked Rich Roberts up and down, took a deep breath and said, You can find this place. You must have known that I am just an employee of the pizza shop. Why can't an employee be one of the murderers? Whether I can be proven guilty is your problem. Before I can't prove that I am a criminal, then I am innocent. A legal citizen, a taxpayer, and the presumption of innocence is the civilization and progress of modern criminal justice and the basic guarantee of human rights. I advise you not to cause trouble for yourself. I can sue you for human rights violations and abuse. Sean stared at the other party without giving in. As a criminal, the first thing is to understand how to deal with the police. He is white, and the other party dare not shoot without sufficient reason, and this is the United States where the air is full of the smell of freedom. Police? Ha! Rich Roberts was stunned by what he said. He also noticed the problem, but he was very embarrassed. I don't think a waiter in a pizza shop knows any legal provisions. Ha! You have another crime now. You are discriminating. Discriminating against service industry personnel. You are a policeman. You represent the police system. Do you mean that the entire Newark police system discriminates against service industry practitioners? Sean showed a sarcastic smile at the corner of his mouth, which made Rich Roberts even more angry. As a mature and experienced baptism of countless hardships, taking out of context and expanding infinitely. Isn't this a basic quality? If he suffered a loss in the quarrel, Sean felt sorry for the party, the country, the people, and the sick physical education teacher. You fart. Rich Roberts' face flushed. It was impossible to shoot, but it was difficult to get off the tiger. Okay, young man. Don't you want to take a shower? Old Mike didn't want to talk. He would retire in a few days, and he didn't want to care about such things. Looking up at Old Mike, who spoke for the first time since entering the door, he was calm and quiet, without the aggressive smell of Rich Roberts next to him. Sean grinned. I don't know the name of this police officer yet. Just call me Old Mike. Old Mike. Okay, thank you. After that, he stopped looking at Rich Roberts and began to take off his clothes. Westchester County, New York, upstream of the Hudson River, an hour's drive from Manhattan Island, New York. There is a world-famous manor, which covers an area of 4,000 acres and 16 million square meters, equivalent to 5 Ming Yuan gardens. Its owner's name is Rockefeller family. Are you ready for tomorrow's funeral? A middle-aged lady in a white suit asked the old butler in front of her. Everything is ready, ma'am. The butler, with a very neatly trimmed beard, bowed slightly in a very British style. Has the illegitimate child been notified? Yes.